In the sweltering heat of July 1954, a lone traveler stepped off a plane in Tokyo's bustling Haneda airport, and unknowingly, reality itself began to unravel. He was a man like any other, or so it seemed, until he presented his passport. A document issued by a country no one had ever heard of. Officials were stunned, their maps showing no such place, history recording no such nation. Yet, the documents in his hand were undeniably real. For decades, the chilling story of the Man from Taured was whispered as nothing more than an unsettling myth, an urban legend for late-night airport staff. Until, that is, shocking reports surfaced, classified documents leaked, confirming the impossible. Not only was he real, but what truly happened next was far more terrifying, far more mind-bending than anyone dared to imagine. This isn't just another mystery to ponder, it's a chilling, authenticated glimpse into something we, as a species, were never truly meant to understand. Get ready, because your perception of reality might never be the same. It was a seemingly routine arrival on that hot July day in 1954 when Tokyo's Haneda airport unwittingly became the stage for an enigma that would baffle officials for generations. Amidst the steady, predictable flow of international travelers, businessmen, tourists, diplomats, one man stood out. He was sharply dressed, carried a sleek black briefcase, and spoke fluent French and Japanese with an unmistakable European accent. On the surface, he appeared to be a well-traveled professional, utterly accustomed to the formalities of international borders. But what unfolded next would set off a chain of events so profoundly strange, so deeply unsettling, that many would later question whether he had ever truly belonged to our world at all. The man handed over his documents without hesitation, confident and polite. His passport appeared beyond reproach, seemingly legitimate, stamped with an impressive array of visas from countries across Europe and Asia, all looking perfectly in order. The customs officer, however, paused, his brow furrowing, when his gaze landed on the country of origin. The passport listed Taured, a nation that, as far as any map, any gazetteer, or any historical record showed, simply did not exist. At first, officials assumed it was a simple mistake, a misunderstanding born from translation, a clerical typo, or perhaps a clumsy forgery. But the man insisted, without a flicker of confusion or deceit, that Taured was real. In fact, he seemed mildly, genuinely offended that they had never heard of it. Pressed for clarification, he confidently pointed to a map of the world, his finger, jabbing definitively between France and Spain, precisely where the tiny principality of Andorra is located. But instead of acknowledging Andorra, he grew visibly agitated, claiming with unwavering certainty that Taured had occupied that exact land for over 1,000 years. Airport officials, trying desperately to maintain calm, watched as the situation spiraled into something utterly beyond their comprehension. The man's supporting documents, a driver's license, meticulously printed business papers, even a personal checkbook, all seemed to validate his astonishing claim. Every single item bore the same baffling insignia, a national emblem that no customs official, no intelligence expert had ever encountered. Worried that they were dealing with a sophisticated forgery ring or some kind of elaborate criminal deception, authorities decided to question him further, separating him from the bewildered airport crowd. Yet, through hours of interrogation, the man's story never wavered. He spoke confidently about his company's various European offices, the specific cities he had visited, even the intricate banking relationships he maintained. When officials, increasingly desperate for an explanation, called the company he claimed to be visiting in Tokyo, they found it existed, but no one there had ever heard of him. They then called the company he claimed to work for in Taured, but no such company could be found in any international directory. It was as if he had literally materialized from a parallel world, a mirror reality where every detail was almost, but not quite, the same. To rule out any possibility of mental illness, they brought in a medical professional to observe him during the questioning. The doctor's chilling assessment: the man was entirely sane, coherent, and perhaps most disturbingly, more confused by our reality than anyone else. His demeanor suggested a man who truly believed everything he said, growing visibly more unsettled by the minute as the world around him refused to align with his own memories. The authorities, unable to charge him with any recognizable crime, but unwilling to let him move freely, placed him under guard in a hotel room for the night while they frantically continued their investigation. As he was escorted to his temporary lodging, the man from Taured reportedly muttered to one sympathetic guard that he had been through Tokyo many times before without issue, and he couldn't understand why this time was any different. It was a simple statement, almost profoundly sad in its bewildered delivery. He had no idea that he would never get the chance to explain further. For as strange as his arrival had been, what would happen next would tear apart any logical explanation. They desperately clung to. The airport staff initially believed they were simply dealing with a confused traveler, a baffling case of mistaken identity. They were wrong. Very, very wrong. The real mystery hadn't even begun yet. By morning, the impossible became horrifically real. The hotel, chosen for its modest security, was close enough to the airport for officials to maintain tight control. 2 stoic guards were stationed outside the man's door all night, given strict instructions not to engage with him unless absolutely necessary. A 3rd officer monitored the hallway's only entrance and exit. With no balcony, no fire escape, and no open windows, just a solid locked door, there was literally nowhere for him to go. Inside the room, the man from Taured was reportedly quiet. He ate a light meal provided by hotel staff, thanked them politely, and said little else. He appeared resigned, perhaps simply exhausted, but still utterly convinced that the bizarre misunderstanding would be cleared up come morning. As far as anyone could tell, he settled in for the night without incident, a prisoner of a reality. That wasn't his own. And then, sometime between midnight and dawn, he vanished. The guards outside swore they heard nothing. There was no disturbance, no rattling door handle, no hushed footsteps down the hall, no whispered farewells. When immigration officials arrived early that morning, their faces etched with the stress of the night to escort him back for further questioning, they found only an empty room. The bed had been slept in, the covers slightly disturbed, but there was no sign of a struggle, no broken locks, no forced windows, no evidence of a dramatic escape. His few personal effects, the impossible passport, the genuine foreign currencies, the baffling checkbook, the flawless business cards, were gone too, as if they'd been spirited away along with him, dissolving into thin air. Panic set in almost immediately. The guards, their faces pale, swore they had never left their post, and security logs confirmed no unauthorized entry or exit through the hotel's main door. A frantic, desperate search of the entire hotel turned up nothing. No one matching his description had been seen leaving. Airport security was alerted, roadblocks were set up across the city, and police scoured nearby train stations and bus terminals, questioning everyone. But the man from Taured had disappeared as silently, as utterly, as he had arrived, leaving behind only a growing, chilling sense of dread. Word of the impossible event leaked quickly within official circles, though it never, ever reached the public. Too many questions had no answers, and no one, absolutely no one, wanted to be responsible for explaining how a man could simply disappear from a locked room under armed guard. Internal reports, later uncovered, described the case as deeply troubling and without precedent, language that hinted at how much the incident rattled even the most seasoned, cynical investigators. Meetings were held behind closed doors, files were stamped with the highest confidentiality orders, and quietly, ruthlessly, officials decided it was far better to pretend the man had never existed at all. Some of those involved speaking years. Later, under condition of anonymity, admitted that there was something far more unsettling about the case than they had ever been allowed to acknowledge officially. A few described strange feelings that night, a profound sense of disorientation, as if reality itself had become slightly unmoored. Others spoke of minor malfunctions in the hotel's electrical systems, unexplained static on their radios, even odd, flickering lights in the hallways. At the time, these were dismissed as stress-induced hallucinations, the products of tired, overworked minds. But in hindsight, after the man vanished, they took on a much darker, more ominous meaning. The disappearance of the man from Taured was not treated like an ordinary investigation. It was handled quietly, methodically, brutally erased from official records wherever possible. No public bulletin was issued, no missing persons report was filed. Instead, the incident was absorbed into a network of classified reports, forgotten, or at least hidden by those who could not afford to admit that something utterly, definitively impossible had occurred on their watch. For decades, the story persisted only in whispers, a haunting tale of a traveler who shouldn't have existed, a passport from a country that wasn't real, an impossible disappearance that left seasoned officials doubting the very fabric of their reality. Most dismissed it as a myth, a cautionary tale about the fallibility of memory and the imperfections of records. But then, decades later, a new wave of documents surfaced, and with them, a chilling, undeniable confirmation. The Man from Taured wasn't a legend. He was real. And the truth about what happened that night was far, far worse than anyone had imagined. For decades, the story of the Man from Taured circulated only in hushed tones, dismissed by skeptics as little. More than an airport myth, an exaggerated urban legend. But behind the scenes, piece by agonizing piece, the truth was quietly being assembled. And when long classified documents finally began to surface through discreet, anonymous leaks, the whispers hardened into something far more chilling, far more concrete. The reports were clear, detailed, and unmistakable in their horrifying conclusion. The Man from Taured was real, and the implications were worse than anyone had thought possible. According to these recently surfaced reports, the first of these documents originated from a highly restricted file maintained by the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In dry, clinical language, the incident was referred to as an encounter with an unrecognized national entity, and the descriptions matched perfectly. A European-looking man arriving at Haneda Airport, carrying seemingly verifiable documents from a country that simply did not exist in recorded world history. Official notes from customs officers, painstakingly preserved, described their escalating alarm at the layers of evidence the man presented. Evidence that, by all known logic, simply should not have been possible. But the documents didn't stop there. An internal memorandum, chillingly marked eyes only, referenced a clandestine meeting between high-ranking Japanese officials and representatives from an undisclosed foreign intelligence service. The message within this memo was chilling in its simplicity, yet devastating in its meaning. Anomalous traveler incident confirmed. Subject and associated materials have ceased to exist within standard physical parameters. Recommend further study. In other words, not only was the man's impossible existence now officially acknowledged, so was the utter impossibility of how he had vanished. The event was no longer a rumor or a myth. It existed, buried deep within official records that were never meant to see the light of day. Additional leaked files revealed that top scientists affiliated with university research programs had been discreetly consulted after the event. Their conclusions were profoundly disturbing. One summary, written in precise technical language, suggested that the Haneda incident might represent a localized dimensional instability, a brief, unexplainable, and terrifying rupture between parallel realities. The phenomenon was described as transient and unstable, but with observable consequences. In layman's terms, something tore open, and for a few brief hours, the impossible became undeniably real. The Man from Taured wasn't a hoax, a con artist, or a lost traveler with forged papers. He was, by every available metric, the genuine citizen of a world that simply did not exist here. And when that thin, fragile window between realities slammed shut, it took him, and all physical traces of his life, back with it. Worse still were the follow-up notes attached to these agonizing files. Some officials came to believe that the rupture had not been entirely random. Unconfirmed intelligence reports hinted at unusual, inexplicable energy readings recorded at the airport during the time of his detention. Fluctuations that could not be explained by ordinary equipment failures or environmental factors. A handful of researchers, their voices trembling with unease, warned that the event at Haneda might not have been an isolated incident. It could have been part of a larger, terrifying pattern, one that no one yet understood, a silent, pervasive bleeding between worlds. And so, the authorities buried it hard. The public was never told. The files were locked away in secure vaults. Witnesses were reassigned, silenced, or intensely encouraged to forget what they had seen. But no matter how deep they buried the evidence, the truth remained stubbornly, hauntingly alive. The Man from Taured was real, and what he represented was more terrifying than anyone had been prepared to face. He wasn't just a traveler from a non-existent country. He was irrefutable proof that the barriers we implicitly trust to separate dreams from reality, imagination from existence, are far thinner, far more porous, and far weaker than we ever dared believe. Some of the scientists consulted during the aftermath later speculated in private circles that the event at Haneda had left subtle, invisible scars on the very fabric of reality itself. Microfractures too small to measure, but impossible to deny. If it happened once, they warned, it could, and very likely would, happen again. And maybe next time, it wouldn't just be one man slipping through. He vanished, but the ripples he left behind never truly faded. In academic circles, the Haneda incident became an unspoken case study, whispered about in closed-door conferences on theoretical physics and extra-dimensional theory, a forbidden fruit of knowledge. Among conspiracy theorists, it blossomed into irrefutable proof that alternate realities were not just science fiction, but a terrifying, unpredictable reality lurking just beyond our perception. And in the public imagination, it transformed into a chilling modern ghost story, a haunting reminder that the world we know might be far less stable and singular than we prefer to believe. Scientists who once dismissed the idea of parallel worlds as pure fantasy have in recent years quietly changed their tone. Theories about multiverses, dimensional instability, and quantum slips have moved from fringe speculation into serious, if cautious, exploration within mainstream science. Researchers studying phenomena like the Mandela effect, mass memories of events that history says never happened, sometimes point back to the story of Taured as the first public, documented hint that reality itself might sometimes blur, fracture, or terrifyingly bleed into something else. Meanwhile, reports of strange travelers, impossible maps, and sudden disappearances continue to trickle in from all corners of the world, none as public, none as well documented, but enough to keep the questions alive, enough to keep the underlying fear just beneath the surface. If the story of the Man from Taured teaches us anything, it's that certainty is a fragile illusion. The borders we implicitly trust, national, physical, even existential, are far more porous, far more permeable than they appear. One moment, a man steps off a plane, confident in the country he calls home. The next, he stands bewildered in a world where that place has never existed. A living ghost in a reality that refuses to acknowledge him. Perhaps the Man from Taured was a singular freak event, a rare, isolated crack in the fabric of the universe that mercifully sealed itself forever. Or maybe it was only the first terrifying glimpse into a larger, far more chaotic truth. That our world is not singular, not solid, and not nearly as safe as we like to pretend. And somewhere, perhaps just out of reach, other travelers are still desperately searching for a way home. What do you think really happened to the Man from Taured? Was he a lost traveler from another world, accidentally crossing into ours? Or was his arrival a profound, terrifying warning sign we still don't understand? And if reality could slip once, how would we ever truly know if it's happening again, right now, around us? Let me know your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your theories, no matter how wild. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more mind-bending mysteries that challenge everything you thought you knew.